Tonight the forest felt like a held breath. The pines under Mount Qingling leaned together as if eavesdropping, their needles whisper silent against a fog that pooled low and slow. Brother Liang moved through that hush with a familiar calm, each step measured, each tendon tuned. He trained alone often, believing that exposure to risk was the sharpest teacher of discipline and humility. The solitude was part practice, part pilgrimage, a way to learn not just techniques but limits, not just balance but perspective. On this misty evening the world around him seemed to pause and listen, and underneath that pause there was a different current, something deep, earthy, and animal. Then he smelled it. Not a scent that announced itself with florid notes, but a primal, musky weight that pressed into the back of the throat. It was a smell that read like a map of territory: damp fur, old blood, the iron tang of challenge. Liang's body tightened. The training that had been repetition all day crystallized into alertness. He lowered his stance instinctively. Stillness first, the oldest rule of survival. Move only if necessary, breathe deliberately, let the world reveal itself. From the shadows stepped a grizzly, a mountain sculpted into flesh and fur. It was massive in a way that made the trees seem to shrink, shoulders like felled trunks, a hump that spoke of raw power. Eyes small and purpose-driven. Steam rose from the bear's breath in slow, rumbling clouds. Its fur bristled, every hair a filament of intent. Liang counted heartbeats, not because he needed to time anything but because counting steadied him. He could have run, could have tried to climb, could have summoned every old tactic. Instead he rooted into a lower posture and let the forest do its work, present, observant, ready. The bear advanced anyway. It did not circle and dawdle. It moved as if the world included only predator and immediately considered threat. It reared to full height and let out a roar that shook pine needles loose like confetti. The sound cracked through the stillness and rattled Liang's skeleton in a way that was biological rather than emotional. In a single heartbeat the bear charged, a living mountain collapsing into motion. Liang sidestepped, not by much, and the bear's paw sliced where his head had been moments before. The swipe tore bark from a nearby sapling and sprayed dust into the fog. He felt the air pressure of its blow across his face and counted another steadying beat. He struck pressure points along the bear's ribs, hands moving fast and precise. Those taps were not meant to fell the animal but to redirect, to disturb the rhythm of its assault. They were techniques handed down from forms that had been practiced in both monastery courtyards and hard wilderness. The blows landed with short, deliberate impact. They were a language meant to suggest submission, restraint, or distraction. The bear barely slowed. A grizzly is a force of momentum and instinct. A few pokes do not rewrite that calculus. The bear lunged again, and this time Liang paid for his study. Its shoulder clipped his thigh in a movement that was less about accuracy than about the sheer intent to dominate. He sailed into the moss, the world momentarily widening into detail. The cold bite of damp, the sting of a new seam of pain, the owl's soft hush that followed impact. Pain flared bright and immediate. Where the thigh had met the bear was a hot, roaring line. Liang shifted his breath outward, practiced and slow, letting each exhale peel away the iron of panic. He rolled, instinct guiding him into iron bamboo stance, a pose that imitates the flexible strength of bamboo, rooted at the base, free at the top, able to bend without breaking. The bear's attacks were relentless. It did not tire with the kind of fatigue humans imagine. It tested, probed, corrected. Liang redirected momentum more than he blocked, using angles and leverage to steer the animal's bulk when brute force would only end poorly. He led the beast into a boulder with the practiced trajectory of a man who had trained to use the environment as ally. The impact thundered through stone and fur. The grizzly staggered, a brief falter that felt like a promise. Maybe, if moved right, danger could be contained. Liang scrambled up a jagged rock ledge to gain ground, to reposition his center of gravity above the bear's natural plane. He wanted vantage, a small advantage. The grizzly climbed after him, claws finding purchase in the stone, chiseling miniature avalanches of grit as it ascended. Liang leapt across a narrow ravine, a light, almost thoughtless motion born of agility and sheer will. He made the landing with a muted thud and a sharp intake. The edge of the opposite rock bit into his shoe, sending a jolt up his leg like an electric reprimand. Then the bear jumped too. In the span of a breath, the world tilted toward peril. The bear's front paws caught the ledge Liang had just vacated, fingers of brute strength raking for purchase. Its back paws missed. For a suspended moment, the animal hung like an unfinished sentence, gravity pulling truth through the air. Claws scraped at stone as the bear slipped, a sound like a slow scraped violin string. Instinct reached for a compassionate bridge between predator and man. Liang reached out to catch the animal's paw, to steady that living pendulum. He wanted to stop the fall, to show strength without cruelty. But the ledge crumbled under the sudden redistribution of weight. Rock, soil, and animal gave way together. The bear fell into the ravine, its roar collapsing into the dimness below and then fading into the forest's low, enduring silence. The forest exhaled after the fall. The great engines of wood and root settled back into their long-time rhythms. A birdless hush, a drip of dislodged water, the small, precise noises of insects resuming their ancient contracts. Liang stood on the upper ledge, chest heaving, leg bleeding where the bear had clipped him, heart a fierce drum. He did not cheer. There is no victory song for such encounters, no triumphant flourish. Instead, he bowed his head, a small, involuntary nod to the enormity that had just been present. The bow was not a celebration, it was acknowledgement. Not all battles are victories in the tidy sense. Some fights end because the world shifts, because chance and geometry and timing conspire to spare one life and change another. Some are reminders that even the most disciplined practitioner is a small thing in the geography of mountains and forests. That technique must always be married to humility. That survival sometimes means the narrow mercy of circumstance rather than the righteousness of skill. Liang felt these truths in the ache that threaded his muscles and the quiet that pressed into his chest. He had been tested and had not been broken, yet the event carved into him a new understanding of his place in a wild ecosystem that had no obligation to his concepts of honor or mastery. He walked down into the ravine as soon as it was wise to move, descending with a caution that had nothing to do with pride. The bear's body lay in a hollow, breathing but stunned, eyes clouded with the slow realization of injury. Liang approached with steady hands, not to gloat but to check, to be sure the creature's suffering would not go unattended. He fashioned a crude sling from his robe and bound one of the animal's wounds, a gesture awkward and human in the face of a colossal, indifferent nature. The bear watched him with an animal watchfulness that was not gratitude nor recognition of kindness so much as a cataloging of human behavior for the record of life. Liang's touch was careful, respectful of the living boundary between man and beast. In the long minutes that followed, he tended his own wounds as best he could, binding the torn fabric of his pants and setting a compressed bundle of clean cloth against the bleeding cut. There was no hurry in the way he worked. Haste could raise the risk of error, and error had a cost he now knew well. The forest listened. Sunlight, diluted by mist, started to pattern the rocks like a slow, living mosaic. He breathed, felt the pain like a map, each line a lesson. When he finally left the ravine, the mountain seemed unchanged, yet everything was subtly different. The pines held their needles a fraction tighter. Streams would run their same courses. Animals would remember in ways humans never recorded. But within Liang, something important had shifted, an old confidence tempered by a new humility, a deeper sense of interdependence. The bear's fall and the consequent quiet were not signs of conquest but of a complex balance being reasserted. Some battles are not victories in the way people talk about them. They are wake-up calls, humility lessons carved into the bone. Liang knew the forms and the pressure points and the meditative steadiness because he had trained a lifetime to be ready, but readiness did not auto-translate into dominion. The world kept its own laws, and humans lived inside them, privileged sometimes, endangered sometimes, never the center of every story. On the path back to the monastery, the fog thinned and the first stars pricked through like pinholes in a dark, soft cloth. Liang moved with careful steps, the wound on his leg a steady companion and an honest reminder. He did not rehearse the encounter into a tale of heroism. Instead, he carried it as a quiet hum beneath his breath, a story to be folded into practice and not paraded as proof of mastery. The mountain would continue to offer its teachings, sometimes harsh, sometimes benevolent. The forest would keep its secrets, sometimes sharing them through the scent of fur and the pattern of broken branches. He walked on, aware that in the world of mountains and forests and grizzlies, even a Shaolin warrior was small, and that smallness, if embraced, could teach as much as any victory.